And I'll use the dorsal capitate as the first example. And remembering that if we're talking about dorsal capitate, we're talking about it being subluxed on the lunate. And this, of course, you'll find from your passive examination. So if we turn to the wrist and we take Donna's wrist, we shall come onto the dorsum of the capitate. Now this is sitting dorsally, as I say. The thrust now wants to be palmally. I need, though, to stabilise the lunate, and I do this by using my index fingers and blocking the lunate palmally. I'll then put one thumb over the capitate and the other thumb on top of that thumb, which will provide the thrust. The wrist must be kept in its least pack position. If we start to move this towards its close pack position, then the joint will jam and the manipulation will fail. So we keep the wrist at all times in its least pack position. We want to provide a little bit of joint volume, so we'll have the patient just lean backwards away from us slightly to provide that traction as we lean slightly from them. Now don't apply too much traction, otherwise the capsules will tighten up and it will restrict this movement. Stabilising the lunate, I will then thrust the capitate directly palmally. And you'll note that as I did this, it was a straight palmar thrust and there was no extension of the wrist, just straight down. If this capitate had been palmar rather than dorsal, we have a new problem on our hands. It isn't particularly practical to fix the lunate and try and flip the capitate up. It's a technique that's often taught, but it's a technique that doesn't usually work. Rather than do this, we'll fix the capitate palmally, this way, and come onto the dorsum of the lunate with your thumbs. So in effect, we are going to thrust the lunate palmarward, which will have the relative effect of bringing the capitate dorsally, which is the effect that we want. Otherwise, the technique is exactly the same. We'll have the patient just sit away from us and thrust the lunate down against the fixed capitate. When you're doing this technique as practice, you have to be careful. If you do happen to sublux this lunate palmally because you over-manipulate this, you can create a traumatic carpal tunnel syndrome. So when you are practicing this, I wouldn't put too much force through. Of course, when you actually have a patient in this position, then it's a reasonable thing to do. But be careful with the amount of force you apply pushing the lunate palmally. If we